And do you think that the next time it crumbles and falls, that when you go to pick up the phone to call me to save you, that I'm going to be there?
I promise. I won't come to you.
You're more full of than a Christmas goose.
No.
Yes, you are. Everybody's got stress in their life. And then to say, I'm under stress, so I'm going to lie.
Are you going to be part of our lives or not?
Excuse me? You're going to give me the ultimate Forrest?
Mom, accept this proposal or you're not a part of our lives.
Forrest's voice cut through the room like a knife, sharp and unwavering, leaving no room for doubt or negotiation. Mom, if you don't support us, then maybe it's time you weren't a part of our lives. The words hung in the air like a storm about to break, and for a moment, you could feel the weight of years of control and tension compressing every corner of that house. This wasn't a casual disagreement. This was the culmination of decades of Forrest being the quiet, obedient son. The one who had always let his mom pull the strings. The one who had bent to her sarcasm, her guilt trips, her relentless need to oversee every choice he made. And now, for the first time, he was standing tall, fully aware of the risk, and refusing to be manipulated any longer. The air was electric, charged with disbelief, shock, and the kind of tension that makes you lean forward and not breathe for a second because you know something big is unfolding. Sheena stood behind him, calm, collected, and quietly resolute, a steady anchor in the middle of the emotional hurricane. She had already survived countless moments of tension, lies, and overreactions, but this ultimatum was something different. She had been patient, rational, and empathetic throughout their relationship, giving Forrest space to find his voice, but she also understood the stakes. Molly had built walls so high over the years that no adult son had dared scale them. And now Forrest was not only climbing those walls, but throwing them a challenge from the top. Every glance between Forrest and Sheena carried meaning, a subtle reassurance that no matter how the storm played out, he wasn't alone, and they were facing it together. Sheena's presence, even in silence, amplified the tension, making the audience sit up straighter, knowing that her calm might be the only thing preventing this confrontation from becoming completely catastrophic. And that's exactly the point where viewers are going to feel the shock, disbelief, and curiosity we all crave, because this isn't a simple family squabble. This is the moment a grown man finally refuses to be trapped under a lifetime of parental control. You can see the hesitation in Molly's eyes, the small falter in her expression, as if the words she's heard are almost incomprehensible, almost like they belong to someone else, someone she didn't recognize, because Forrest had never spoken like this before. She's processing the idea that her son has opinions, desires, and boundaries that exist independently of her influence, and the sheer audacity of it is both infuriating and stunning. Every viewer can feel the stakes. Every viewer knows that decades of emotional patterns are being challenged in one single statement, and everyone watching is immediately asking themselves, how will she respond? Will she crumble under the realization, or will she retaliate with sarcasm, manipulation, or guilt? Will this ultimatum permanently fracture their bond, or will some hidden thread of maternal connection survive? This is the perfect moment to pause and bring everyone into our space. Welcome to TLC Drama Live. I'm Sabrina, and today we're witnessing a confrontation that feels almost impossible to process. One that will leave you questioning family dynamics, loyalty, and the true cost of standing up for yourself. So hit that subscribe button, drop a comment down below with your take, and let us know what would you do if you were in Forrest's shoes. Would you risk everything for your relationship, or would you fold under pressure? Because right now, the tension is palpable, the emotional stakes are sky high, and every second that passes in this room is building to a moment no one saw coming. Even before Molly can speak, Forrest continues, the words rolling out with a confidence that surprises even him. I love you, Mom, but this is my choice, and I will not let anyone control who I marry. You can almost hear the room gasp in unison, even if only in your imagination. It's rare to witness this kind of bravery in real time, and the audience is already hooked because you know the consequences could be devastating. Not just for Forrest and Sheena, but for the mother-son relationship that has shaped his life for decades. Sheena's presence, calm but firm, underscores the gravity of this moment and offers viewers a sense of hope that sometimes standing up for your love requires standing up to the people you've always loved most. And it doesn't make you cruel or selfish, it makes you human. Every glance, every pause, every controlled inhale in this room is charged with unspoken questions. How will Molly respond? Will she retreat behind guilt and sarcasm, or will she recognize this as a turning point? an opportunity to rebuild a more balanced relationship. Can Forrest actually maintain his boundaries, or will years of conditioning and emotional pressure pull him back? The air is thick with tension, and the viewers are glued to every syllable, because this confrontation is not just drama, it's real, raw, and painfully relatable for anyone who has struggled to set boundaries with someone they love. Do you think anyone has ever stood up to a parent like this on TLC? Forrest had barely finished speaking when Molly's face contorted into a mix of disbelief and fury, like she couldn't quite process that her little boy had grown a backbone, and her first instinct wasn't to listen, it was to attack. Her voice rose with that familiar sharpness, dripping with sarcasm and just enough venom to make anyone's skin crawl. Oh, so now you're the grown-up? The one making all the decisions while I just sit here quietly and watch? Every word was calculated to make him doubt himself, to pull him back into the web of control she had spun over decades. She mocked Sheena in the same breath, twisting innocuous words into weapons, poking fun at her phrasing, her tone, everything that Forrest had come to rely on as a steady partner. Sheena, as calm as ever, tried to intervene subtly, but Molly barely registered her presence, as though the very idea of someone challenging her authority was an offense in itself. Her obsession with control wasn't subtle, it seeped out in the smallest details, in questions that shouldn't matter, in bizarre comments about hypothetical situations that no one had brought up, especially anything remotely related to sex or fidelity. "I just don't understand how you can trust her," she said, shaking her head, eyebrows raised, voice thick with judgment. "You really think she wouldn't, diddle around while you were here?" The word felt awkwardly, clumsy, almost comical in its delivery, yet the underlying intent was crystal clear. To provoke, to unsettle, to plant doubt in Forrest's mind. It was unnerving for viewers, because the behavior is undeniably strange and at the same time painfully familiar to anyone who's dealt with a parent using fear and weird obsessions as a way to control your choices. Forrest, on the other hand, had shifted subtly. Gone was the boy who nodded, who swallowed hard, who tried to appease his mom at every turn. He was still calm, measured, but his patience carried weight. Every sarcastic jab, every guilt-laden comment bounced off him now, absorbed but not internalized. His emotional growth was on display for viewers to see. The way he met her sarcasm with reasoned responses. The way he looked to Sheena for silent support. The way he was learning to shield himself from the toxic pull of manipulation. There was tension in the air, yes, but it was now balanced by the tension of anticipation. Would he cave under the barrage, or would he hold firm and assert his own life for the first time without apology? Molly's tactics continued with relentless consistency. She questioned motives, mocked intentions, and circled topics she knew would get under Forrest's skin, repeating phrases and jabs she had perfected over years. "I've been trying to guide you, help you, and all you do is run off with her ideas," she said, her voice sharp, but trembling with the faint undercurrent of hurt she disguised as anger. The subtle guilt embedded in her words was her signature move, her way of making Forrest doubt the legitimacy of his own choices, all while positioning herself as the wronged party. But Forrest had learned to separate the logic from the theatrics. He could hear her hurt, he could see her manipulation, and he could still choose to remain unshaken. Viewers are drawn into every exchange, feeling the absurdity and the tension simultaneously. They see Sheena's patient encouragement, Forrest's growing courage, and Molly's unrelenting need to dominate the conversation. Every sarcastic jab, every awkward obsession, every guilt trip raises the stakes, pushing the narrative forward while leaving the audience on edge. The emotional tug of war is palpable, and the question keeps lingering in the air like smoke in a room: will Forrest finally bow to her words, or is he truly breaking free? Would you stay silent if your mom controlled every part of your love life? Forrest took a slow, steady breath, letting the tension settle around him like a heavy fog, and then he spoke with a firmness that carried both reflection and resolve. "Mom, I know I've let you guide me for a long time," he began, voice measured but firm, "and I understand why you think you have to protect me. But this is my life, and I have to make choices for myself." For anyone watching, it was a rare glimpse of someone standing at the crossroads between decades of dependency and the uncharted territory of true independence. The calm clarity in his words contrasted sharply with the chaos around him, and the room seemed to pulse with anticipation. Because the fight was no longer just words, it was Forrest staking his claim to adulthood. Sheena's presence beside him was quiet but powerful. She didn't need to speak, Her calm gaze, the subtle nods, and the small reassuring touches were enough to reinforce that he wasn't alone, that this decision wasn't reckless, and that love could be a stabilizing force in the middle of emotional storms. Viewers could feel the relief in her stance, the sense that Forrest had found his anchor in a partner who understood the challenge of disentangling love from parental influence. It was almost as if she were silently saying, "I've got your back," even when the person who raised you is trying to pull you down with every word. Forrest continued, carefully unpacking his reasoning, not in anger, but in logic. "I need to live my life on my own terms," he said, eyes locked on Molly. "I need to make decisions, take responsibility, and yes, sometimes fail. But I can't keep living in fear of disappointing you, or bending to rules I didn't choose. My choices are mine, and I need you to respect that, even if it's hard for you to understand." The strength in his voice wasn't just in the words themselves, it was in the acknowledgement of past mistakes, in the courage to admit he had relied too much on her guidance, and in the refusal to let that past dictate his future. For the audience, this was a moment of both hope and suspense. Could someone truly break free from decades of control, and would Molly let him? Molly's eyes flickered with a mixture of incredulity, confusion, and maybe even a hint of fear. This was her son, the one she had always seen as dependent, as needing her supervision, and suddenly he was presenting a structured argument, articulating boundaries, and asserting choices that directly contradicted everything she had built her influence upon. Forrest wasn't attacking, he wasn't being rude, he wasn't rejecting her love, he was simply claiming his right to live authentically, and that distinction made the confrontation almost unbearably intense to watch. Every viewer could feel the tension. A son trying to assert independence, a mother grappling with losing control, and a partner silently supporting the move that could either save or fracture everything. By the time he finished speaking, the air in the room had shifted slightly. It wasn't victory yet, and it wasn't defeat, but it was a clear turning point. Forrest had articulated a personal truth, an emotional boundary that couldn't be ignored, and the moment carried an energy that was almost tangible. Sheena's relief was subtle but visible, and the audience could sense it too. Hope, yes, but with the underlying fear of what might come next. Could they survive the storm together, or was the emotional strain of challenging parental authority too heavy to withstand? The tension and anticipation were electric, leaving viewers locked into the story, eager to see what would happen next, and already invested in the couple's journey toward autonomy. Standing up to a parent never comes easy. How far would you go? Sheena stepped forward, her movements unassuming but deliberate, a quiet presence in the storm that Forrest had just unleashed. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't trying to compete with Molly's volume or sarcasm, she didn't need to. Instead, her calm radiated authority, the kind that draws attention without demanding it. The kind that makes you lean in because every word matters. She spoke softly but with conviction, addressing the tension that hung over the room like thick smoke. "I know I've made mistakes, Mom. I've hurt Forrest, and I take full responsibility for that. But I'm not here to cause division. I'm here to move forward with honesty and respect." The subtle sincerity in her tone wasn't just words, it was a stabilizing force, the kind of measured accountability that makes people pause even when their emotions are screaming at them to react. As Molly continued with her usual barrage of guilt and sarcasm, Sheena held her ground, refusing to mirror the aggression, refusing to escalate the fight. She carefully reframed every attack, every manipulation, turning the energy back to clarity without losing the emotional weight of her presence. When Molly jabbed at past missteps or questioned her intentions, Sheena responded with honesty and openness, acknowledging her flaws without letting them define the moment. "Yes, I lied about certain things," she admitted, her eyes steady, "but I've explained why. And I've been working on being better. I want to show you, not just tell you, that I respect Forrest and this relationship." Her words, soft yet firm, were a challenge in themselves, because they demanded attention without demanding compliance. Forrest watched, visibly bolstered by her presence, his shoulders relaxing slightly as Sheena's voice filled the space with reason. She was reminding him, and the viewers, that confrontation doesn't always need to be loud to be effective. Every careful sentence, every measured pause was a subtle pushback against Molly's control, a way of reclaiming dialogue without provoking the defensive walls she had built. The tension between the calm logic of Sheena and the erratic volatility of Molly created an emotional push and pull that kept the audience on edge, invested not just in the words being said, but in the outcomes of those words. Even as Molly continued with sarcastic remarks and attempts to guilt Forrest into submission, Sheena remained steady, demonstrating accountability while reinforcing the couple's boundaries. She didn't allow the manipulations to derail the conversation. Instead, she validated Forrest's right to make independent choices while simultaneously acknowledging where she could improve herself. The combination was both rare and compelling. A partner who doesn't retreat in the face of parental control, who models emotional intelligence under pressure, and who uses calmness not as submission but as power. For viewers, the scene is mesmerizing because it raises questions about influence and change. Can reason, accountability, and patience truly penetrate someone so entrenched in control and manipulation? Can Sheena's quiet power sway Molly, or is this a battle she's simply unwilling to fight on the terms of fairness and empathy? The room pulses with uncertainty. Forrest's expressions flicker with hope, with relief, and yet there's the undeniable weight of years of conditioning that might be too strong to overcome in one night. Sometimes the voice of reason is the loudest power. Molly's voice rose again, sharp and jagged, cutting through the quiet Sheena had tried to maintain, as if volume alone could reassert her authority. You think you can just make all the decisions now, Forrest? After everything I've done for you, you just throw it back in my face? Every word was layered with guilt, sarcasm, and barely concealed outrage, and you could almost feel the weight of years of control pressing down on Forrest. The room was electric with tension. For anyone watching, it was impossible to look away. Here was a grown man, finally claiming his space, and the parent who had defined his boundaries for decades was not going quietly. Forrest met her storm with a calm firmness that carried more power than yelling ever could. "Mom, I'm not throwing anything back at you," he said, voice steady but unwavering. "I'm making choices for my life, choices that you'll have to respect, or you won't be part of it." His words were precise, a clear ultimatum that cut through the chaos. The audience could feel the suspense building, caught between fear that he might fold and the hope that he would finally stand his ground. Sheena's quiet nod from the side reinforced the stakes. Forrest wasn't alone, and their bond gave him strength the audience could almost touch. Molly's manipulations escalated immediately, her sarcasm dripping in every sentence. "Oh, so now I'm the villain? I'm the one causing all the problems? You're grown now, but I guess that doesn't include thinking for yourself," she jabbed, mixing mockery with guilt tripping. Then, almost absurdly, she pivoted to odd, unsettling comments about fidelity, testing Forrest's resolve. "You really think she's faithful? Or am I supposed to watch you get diddled while I just stand here?" The words landed with both shock and disbelief, creating an uncomfortable tension, yet Forrest didn't flinch. He had faced this manipulation his entire life, and the difference now was that he had a line he would not cross. Each exchange revealed the layered struggle between loyalty and independence, between familial expectation and personal choice. Forrest's arguments were rational, respectful, and deliberate, emphasizing love for his mother but insisting that he had to live his life authentically. "I want you in our lives, Mom, but you have to respect us. If you can't, I can't keep bending to control I didn't ask for," he said. The subtle emotional power here wasn't just in asserting autonomy, it was in doing it without venom, without attacking her identity, just challenging the behavior. The audience could feel the anxiety rise. Could a single conversation break decades of influence? Molly's sarcasm sharpened, each quip a test to see if Forrest would crumble. "Oh, so you think you're the adult now? You're the one making the rules while I just watch?" she spat. Her mocking tone, her choice of words, everything was designed to destabilize him. Yet Forrest remained anchored. His gaze never wavered. His voice held a calm authority that for the viewers created both fascination and tension. Every reaction, every pause, every carefully measured word kept the stakes sky high, making the audience lean closer, desperate to see who would give in first. As the conversation spiraled, the suspense became unbearable. Family bonds were being tested in real time, emotional loyalty and independence colliding with full force. Would Forrest's stand permanently shift the dynamic with his mother? Could Sheena survive the storm of entrenched control? Could one conversation actually change a lifetime of control? Forrest sank into his chair for a moment. the room still vibrating with the echoes of Molly's voice. His hands fidgeted slightly, and for the first time in the confrontation, the weight of the moment pressed visibly on him. Years of control, decades of being told how to live, and now the reality of standing up for himself all collided at once. It wasn't anger or rebellion that crossed his face, it was shock, disbelief, and a strange grief. He was grieving the version of his relationship with his mother he thought he had, the bond he assumed was unbreakable, and yet here it was, stretched to its limits and threatened by the very independence he'd been longing to claim. Every word from Molly had left a mark, whether intentional or not, and Forrest felt the tug of loyalty deep inside him. He loved his mother, always had, but the combination of guilt-tripping, sarcasm, and manipulative language was unlike anything he'd faced before. He replayed her comments, her jabs about fidelity, her accusations, the way she made him feel like a child in front of Sheena, and the disbelief on her face when he refused to back down. The clash between past dependency and present autonomy was raw and unfiltered, leaving the audience holding their breath. Every viewer could sense the internal tension, the push and pull of wanting his mother's approval while simultaneously protecting his future with Sheena. Sheena's hand on his arm reminded him and the audience that there was a safe space outside the chaos. Her presence was grounding, her calm energy a quiet counterbalance to Molly's storm. Forrest looked at her and saw loyalty and patience, accountability and understanding. She had admitted flaws, apologized, and still stood unwavering beside him. That sight brought him a flicker of hope amidst the heartbreak of confrontation, a reminder that some relationships could survive honesty, and that love didn't always require sacrificing one's sense of self. Yet the pressure remained, almost unbearable in its intensity. Molly's extreme reactions had left Forrest reeling, making him question whether asserting independence meant permanently fracturing the most important familial bond in his life. Every word she said tugged at a complex mix of guilt, obligation, and love. He recognized the manipulation for what it was, but recognition didn't erase the pain of hearing a parent reject the path he had chosen for his own happiness. The audience could feel the tension tighten like a viz. Every sentence in this room held emotional weight, and every pause suggested an impending decision that would reverberate through their lives. Forrest's mind raced. Could he protect his love for Sheena without destroying his relationship with his mother? Could the engagement, something he and Sheena had planned carefully and patiently, survive this storm of emotional pressure and manipulation? And in that moment, viewers were left on edge, watching someone navigate the impossible. The love for a parent versus the love for a partner. Loyalty versus autonomy. Fear versus courage. What would you do if your parent rejected your happiness? Forrest inhaled deeply, his chest tight, but his voice unwavering as he faced his mother once more. The air in the room felt electric, charged with the remnants of the previous exchange, and yet Forrest knew he had to make this absolutely clear. Mom, I've tried to listen, I've tried to respect your feelings, but this isn't about disrespecting you. This is about me making choices for my life. I need you to support us, or step back. There's no in between. The words carried weight, finality, and for the first time, the full force of his adulthood hit the room. Molly blinked, momentarily stunned, her expression flickering between disbelief and outrage. She had never been confronted like this, especially not by the child she had molded and guided for over 3 decades. But old patterns die hard, and she quickly regrouped, firing back with a counter-ultimatum dripping with sarcasm and guilt. Oh, so now I have to leave your life completely just because you think you're grown? You'll see, Forrest. If you push me out, don't expect me to be waiting when things fall apart. You'll regret this choice. Her words were calculated to destabilize, designed to make him second-guess himself, but Forrest remained anchored. A surprising contrast to the turbulence she unleashed. The tension skyrocketed. This was no longer a simple disagreement. It was a battle over control, a test of emotional boundaries, a moment where the psychological stakes couldn't be higher. Every viewer could feel the invisible pressure pressing down. A parent refusing to relinquish authority versus a grown child claiming autonomy for the first time. Forrest's posture, his measured tone, and his calm but firm language all signaled a new era in their relationship. He was no longer willing to let guilt dictate his actions. Sheena watched quietly from the side, her hand occasionally brushing Forrest's arm, a subtle reassurance that he was not alone in the storm. Her calm presence contrasted sharply with Molly's volatility, highlighting the imbalance of power and the emotional strategy at play. Molly's sarcastic remarks tried to provoke anger, yet Forrest responded with logic and empathy, not aggression. "Mom, I love you. I always will. But I can't let control and fear dictate my happiness. You can choose to be part of our lives, or you can step aside. That's it." Each moment in this scene is a study in emotional stakes. Forrest is asserting his independence, drawing a line in the sand, while Molly reacts unpredictably, trying to manipulate, guilt, and provoke simultaneously. The audience can't help but feel anger at the parental control being exercised, but also empathy for a mother struggling to let go, caught between love and the fear of losing her child's constant presence. The back and forth escalates with every word, the emotional tension so palpable that viewers are gripping their screens, waiting for a crack, a hesitation, a moment where Forrest might fold. The stakes are monumental. A single decision in this room could redefine family dynamics permanently, shatter loyalty, or cement boundaries that have been long overdue. Sometimes standing up feels like losing everything you've ever known. Forrest slumped back slightly, the adrenaline of confrontation fading but leaving a heavy, almost tangible exhaustion in its place. The weight of what he had just done, drawing a hard line, standing up to decades of parental control, pressed down on him and weighed. His eyes flicked toward Sheena, who exhaled in relief, the tension she had been holding finally breaking just enough for a small, grateful smile. It wasn't joy or celebration, it was a quiet acknowledgement that the storm had passed, at least momentarily. The audience could almost feel the sigh of relief radiating from her, as if she had been carrying not only her own fears, but also Forrest's emotional burden for weeks. Forrest's shock, on the other hand, was more complex. He had expected resistance, perhaps anger, but the sheer intensity of Molly's reactions, her fury, her sarcasm, and the emotional manipulation hit him harder than anticipated. He hadn't just confronted her, he had shattered the familiar rhythm of their relationship. For a moment, he was caught in disbelief that the person who had always been the anchor of his life could respond with such force, almost as if his very independence was a betrayal. His mind raced, trying to reconcile the mother he had known with the person standing before him, furious and hurt, yet still inherently the woman he loved. Molly's feelings were a storm all their own. On one hand, she was furious, convinced that Forrest's newfound autonomy was a rejection of everything she had taught, protected, and tried to control. On the other hand, there was heartbreak, deep, raw, and visible, because in her mind, she had been betrayed, and the child she had guided was no longer the one who needed her direction. The audience could sense her inner conflict even through the sarcasm and sharp words. She was oscillating between anger, sadness, and disbelief, and every gesture, every pointed glance, and every pause conveyed the emotional chaos she was experiencing. Sheena remained quietly steadfast, observing the emotional fallout and offering a stabilizing presence, though she didn't interrupt Forrest's own processing. Her accountability, her willingness to admit flaws, and her calm reasoning contrasted sharply with Molly's volatile mix of fury and heartbreak. She represented a rational counterpoint to the chaos, and viewers could feel the tension between calm stability and emotional turbulence amplifying the stakes. Forrest, still in shock, replayed the exchange in his mind. Could he have approached things differently? Should he have softened his words? Each question tugged at him, and yet he knew that taking a stand was necessary. He had finally reclaimed control over his own life, but the emotional cost was steep. The audience was left caught between admiration for his courage and empathy for the heartbreak that lingered in the room. The scene closes with uncertainty hanging thick in the air. Molly's fury and perceived betrayal collide with Forrest's shock and Sheena's relief, creating a delicate and precarious emotional balance. The tension is unresolved, leaving viewers questioning whether these family bonds, strained and tested to the limit, could ever fully recover. Can love survive when family refuses to let go? Watching the dust settle in the room after the confrontation, it becomes impossible not to pause and consider the full weight of what just happened. Forrest had drawn lines in the sand that could never be easily erased, challenging decades of parental control and habitual manipulation. Every sarcastic remark, guilt trip, and oddly timed jab from Molly was a reminder of how deeply entrenched control can be in family dynamics, especially when a parent conflates care with authority. The audience can sense the push and pull of love and loyalty here. Forrest isn't rebelling out of spite, but out of necessity, reclaiming space to grow as an independent adult while trying not to sever the bond with the woman who shaped so much of his life. Molly's behavior reads like a textbook case of toxic control, but it's also deeply human. Her fury, heartbreak, and obsession with loyalty illustrate a parent wrestling with the fear of being left behind. Her sarcastic jabs at Sheena, the weird focus on hypothetical betrayal, and relentless need to maintain dominance reveal a pattern. Control masked as concern. Forrest has lived under this weight for decades, and his gradual awakening shows the psychology of personal growth in real time. We witness someone learning to separate the value of a parent's love from the need to obey every expectation. A crucial lesson for viewers who might see themselves reflected in this tension. Sheena's role cannot be understated. Her calm, rational, and accountable approach is not just a counterbalance to Molly's storm, it's a model of healthy communication under pressure. By quietly asserting boundaries, apologizing for past mistakes, and refusing to escalate, she demonstrates how patience and accountability can give space for someone like Forrest to assert autonomy. For viewers, it's a subtle but powerful example of emotional intelligence, the ability to maintain composure and advocate for one's own needs even when others are volatile. The conflict patterns on display are brutally familiar yet endlessly engaging. Viewers see cycles of manipulation, guilt, and rebellion repeated in real time. Forrest's growth is measured not just by his words, but by his ability to resist emotional blackmail while still showing empathy for his mother. Molly's unpredictable reactions, alternating between fury and heartbreak, make every interaction feel high stakes, leaving the audience both frustrated at the control and sympathetic toward her struggle. This duality creates a perfect tension that keeps viewers engaged, always wondering whether boundaries will hold or collapse. And yet, questions remain. How will these dynamics shape the next episodes? Will Forrest's newfound assertiveness endure? Or will emotional pressure from his mother chip away at it over time? Will Sheena continue to be the stabilizing force she has been? Or will the stress of parental interference test her patience and resilience? The possibilities are tantalizing, keeping viewers hooked, imagining the shocks and reversals yet to come. Would you let someone control your relationship for decades? Forrest and Sheena walked out of the room, the tension still clinging to their shoulders like an invisible weight, each step measured, cautious, aware that the battle just fought was only one of many in the war for autonomy and love. Relief flickered across Sheena's face, small, quiet, almost imperceptible, but it carried the gravity of someone who had been holding her breath for weeks, maybe months. Forrest's expression was harder to read. Shock lingered, yes, but beneath it was a quiet determination. The unmistakable glow of someone who had finally claimed a sliver of control over his own life. Together, they moved forward, but the road was far from smooth. The echoes of Molly's anger, sarcasm, and relentless control lingered, a reminder that the fight for independence rarely comes without consequences. Back inside, Molly's fury simmered beneath the surface, tangled with heartbreak and what she perceives as betrayal. She had watched her son finally stand up, and while part of her admired the courage, another part felt abandoned, sidelined, and, in her mind, disrespected. Every sarcastic remark, every pointed question she had thrown at Forrest now seemed to hover in the room, unresolved and ready to ignite the next conflict. The audience can feel it too. The tension hasn't disappeared, it's just temporarily paused, waiting for the next trigger. This is the kind of drama that keeps hearts racing, eyes glued to the screen, and emotions riding every twist and turn. Sheena remained the quiet anchor in this storm, her calm and patient approach showing viewers that even in the most chaotic family situations, there's a way to maintain integrity and composure. She took a moment to reflect, her gratitude for Forrest's firmness clear, but she also knew the work wasn't over. Protecting a relationship against years of learned behaviors, guilt, and manipulation requires vigilance, empathy, and steady communication. For the audience, this is an emotional lesson. Love may survive conflict, but only if boundaries are maintained and respect is mutual. Forrest, for his part, carried the weight of both relief and disbelief. The room had been his mother's for so long, and yet he had claimed it for himself, at least metaphorically. He knew that walking away without bowing to pressure was just the start. Every parent-child dynamic is a constant negotiation, and the lingering tension promised that future confrontations were inevitable. He had survived one ultimatum, but the real test would come in everyday life. How long could the boundaries hold, and how would Molly respond when old habits collide with his newfound independence? As they left, the emotional landscape felt incomplete, unresolved, and intentionally so. The audience is left with a mix of relief that Forrest and Sheena remain united, sadness that the parent-child bond is strained, and suspense for what comes next. The story has paid off the immediate setups, ultimatums were drawn, independence asserted, and calm reason demonstrated. Yet the lingering tension with Molly ensures viewers are already imagining the next explosive episode, the next controversial choice, the next shocking revelation. If you thought this was shocking, wait until you see what happens next with another couple.